American Airlines Flight 785, Dallas to Washington DC, prepared for takeoff on a frigid December morning. In the first-class cabin, soft golden light spilled across the leather seats. The quiet chime of boarding music blended with the click of luggage wheels and muted conversation. Comfort, luxury, calm, until she arrived. A woman in her 40s, wrapped in a cream-colored designer suit, stepped into the aisle, heels clicking, a Chanel bag over her shoulder. Her eyes scanned the rows and stopped. Seat 1B. An old man sat there, faded military coat, collar frayed. A cane rested against his knee. His hands moved awkwardly over the seatbelt, fumbling. Dark glasses shielded half his face, but not the deep scar that carved across his temple. She didn't hide her frown. "Ridiculous," she muttered, loud enough to turn heads. "I paid over $3,000 for first class, and I'm stuck next to someone like this, a few rows behind." A passenger lowered his newspaper. Another reached to pause his music. The lead flight attendant approached, calm and composed. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" The woman gestured toward the old man with her chin. "I think there's been a mistake. I don't want to sit next to someone who clearly needs special assistance. This is the first class, right, not a retirement wing." The old man didn't flinch. His hand, resting on the cane, tightened barely. "The seating is correct, ma'am," the attendant said evenly. "He has a valid ticket." The woman scoffed, reapplying lipstick with brisk annoyance. "What's the point of luxury if you're forced to share it with someone who looks like he came from a soup kitchen? I need comfort, not discomfort." A few heads turned. Whispers stirred the cabin. One young man shook his head. An older woman leaned toward her husband. Still, she continued. She pulled out her phone and activated the camera. "This is how they treat paying passengers, forcing me to sit next to a blind man in rags." The old man turned slightly. Behind those dark lenses, no emotion showed. But something about him, his stillness, his silence, dimmed the room. He didn't rise to the insult, just spoke gently, soft, like smoke in the cold. "I don't mind if you're uncomfortable, but please don't disturb the others." She laughed, sharp, brittle. "Who do you think you are, speaking up? You're just a blind old man, in a coat that should have been thrown out years ago." No one spoke. On the worn sleeve of that coat, a faded patch and American flag was barely visible. Beneath it, a threadbare line, 173rd Airborne Brigade. No one looked close enough to read it, not yet. She pressed the attendant again. "I want a new seat, now. I can't sit beside this." The old man bowed his head. Beside him, resting on the tray table, was a small, battered leather notebook. Taped to its cover was a yellowed photograph. 3 young men in paratrooper gear. One stood front and center, eyes sharp, jaw squared. The edges of the photo curled inward over time. No one paid any attention, except one. In the last row, a 10-year-old boy leaned forward, eyes fixed not on the woman, not on the confrontation, but in that photo, that man. The plane taxied toward the runway. The woman kept muttering, passengers turned away, and the old man sat still, hands resting on his cane, dark glasses reflecting nothing. But behind them, his mind wandered, to places the rest of the cabin couldn't see, places where silence wasn't shameful. It was survival. Flight 785 climbed steadily through the thick winter clouds. The Texas skies disappeared below, replaced by an endless white above. In the first-class cabin, the hum of engines throbbed like a distant heartbeat. Passengers settled into silence, but something uneasy still lingered in the air. The woman in the cream suit sat stiffly, arms crossed, tossing resentful glances toward the old man beside her. He didn't look back. Not once. No anger, no hurt. Just a silence so complete, it felt ancient. The kind that only lives in people who've stared death in the face and didn't flinch. The lead flight attendant moved down the aisle, her tray cart gliding gently. At the front row, she paused. "Anything else you need, sir?" she asked softly. The old man shook his head. His weathered fingers still clutched the notebook on his lap. "I'm fine, thank you." There was something in his voice, something that made her pause, just for a moment. Then she gave a quiet smile, not the polished one, a real one, a nod that said more than protocol ever could. Few on the plane knew his name. Even fewer knew his past. John Carter, retired Lieutenant General, 30 years in the U.S. Air Force. Over 200 combat missions in Vietnam. Some were in skies so thick with gunfire that they felt like flying through fire. He never told his story. Not at home, not in public, not even to those who lived next door. To them, he was just a blind old man with a German shepherd named Duke. He walked the Arlington sidewalks each morning, a quiet figure with a cane in one hand and a brown bag in the other. Some mornings, someone would find that bag resting by a park bench, filled with food. No one knew who left it, but the ones who needed it, they knew. Inside the old notebook were black and white photos, edges worn from time. One showed him from behind, parachute slung over his shoulder, pilot's helmet hanging from his hand, another grinning wide in a bunker, a cigarette dangling from his lips while the sky outside burned, but he kept it closed, the book and his mouth. To the cabin, he was no one. But in the last row, a 10-year-old boy kept watching, sharp-eyed, seated beside his mother, voice lowered to a whisper. "Mom, I think he's a soldier." She glanced up and shook her head lightly. "No, sweetie, he's blind now." The boy frowned, but said nothing more. His eyes never left the old man, not out of curiosity, but something deeper. A respect he couldn't explain. 2 rows ahead, a man in a navy suit adjusted his Bluetooth earpiece and leaned toward the aisle as the attendant passed. "Who's that?" he asked. "He looks familiar." The attendant hesitated, then glanced toward the front. "I think—" "He served," she said, "but he hasn't said a word, just quiet." A sudden gust nudged the aircraft. Nothing dangerous, just enough to stir memory. Carter's hand gripped the armrest, a reflex etched in decades. His fingers were rough, one middle finger half gone, a wound from a long-ago explosion that no one questioned, that no one saw. The woman beside him stopped muttering, but she still kept her distance, recoiling as if silence were contagious. She summoned the attendant again. "This seat smells old. I need a wipe. It's giving me a headache." The attendant placed the wipe gently on the tray. Her lips said nothing, but her eyes, just for a second, burned with restrained anger. Outside, the plane broke through the final cloud layer. Sunlight flooded the window. It struck Carter's face with a soft, golden clarity. His dark glasses reflected the light, and for a fleeting moment, it looked as though his eyes still saw, still followed something no one else could. Maybe the jungles near Khe Sanh, maybe a wounded bird falling through fire, maybe the faces of those who never made it home. But in the cabin, they only saw a cane and a coat, not the warrior who once carried others through the sky. Not yet. Halfway through the flight, the tension seemed to ease, but it was only on the surface. The air in first class was still tight, like a thin sheet of glass waiting to crack. Flight attendants moved quietly down the aisle. Trays balanced, smiles softly. But at 1A, the woman in the cream suit stirred again. She didn't look at her food. She looked at him. The old man beside her was struggling. His hands shook as he tried to open a small water cup. His dark glasses hid his eyes, but his movements spoke enough. Careful, fragile. His cane rested against the seat. The old leather notebook still lay on his lap, untouched. He said nothing, but his presence alone seemed to offend her. She sighed loudly, waving at the attendant. "Please serve my water in a glass. I don't want plastic, like he's using—" The attendant paused, keeping her voice level. "All passengers are served the same, ma'am." The woman let out a sharp laugh, the same. "Really look at him. He's like a leftover from a nursing home," then louder, for the entire cabin to hear. "Or is this some kind of charity flight I wasn't informed about?" Murmurs stirred among the passengers. Some glanced up, most looked down again. No one wanted a confrontation. The attendant held her composure. "Please maintain courtesy in the cabin. Everyone deserves respect." The woman raised an eyebrow. "I'm not being rude, just realistic. Look at him. Does he even belong here?" A low voice answered from behind her. "You don't know who he is." She turned, startled. A man in his 40s, t-shirt, cargo pants, a silver chain around his neck engraved with 4 words, USMC, never forgotten. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Do you know what some men paid so you could fly safely today?" The woman sneered. "I know I paid for this seat, and I paid for peace, not to sit next to a beggar in an old uniform." A flicker of shame passed through the row behind her. A few heads turned. The boy in the back leaned forward again, wide-eyed. The plane jolted gently turbulence. The seatbelt light chimed. Carter fumbled for his buckle, his left hand trembling, slow, careful. The motion made the woman scoff. "Can't even buckle up. Embarrassing." Then it happened. He reached for a dropped napkin. His cane slipped. The notebook fell. It hit the floor, pages flaring open. A single photograph slid out and skidded across the aisle. It landed face up. A younger John Carter in full paratrooper gear. The air medal glinting on his chest, wind behind him, purpose in his eyes. For one moment, the cabin held its breath. The woman looked down, then nudged the photo with her shoe casually, cruelly pushing it beneath the seat. Ugh, disgusting, so unhygienic. No one moved. Hands stayed still. Eyes watched, but no one reached. Only Carter, groping blindly, his voice quiet, cracked. "Sorry. Has anyone seen a photo? It's my grandson. He's in there." Still, no one helped. The woman hit the call button hard. "That's it. I'm done. Either he leaves this cabin or I do." And then, a voice, small, but louder than all the noise before it. "He's a hero." It came from the last row. The boy. He stood, holding the photograph. "He fought so people like you could live." His mother pulled at his sleeve, whispering for him to sit, but it was too late. The cabin froze. John Carter turned toward the voice. His face didn't change much, but his lips moved into something soft, something real. "Thank you, son." The woman sniffed, folding her arms. "Real heroes don't need attention," a quiet voice replied from the other side of the aisle. "And rude people don't need a microphone to get it." For a few seconds, everything was still. The photo, the boy, the silence. And in the cockpit, the pilot had been listening. And what he was about to say next would change everything. As the plane began its descent, the cabin lights softened to a warm amber glow. The taunts, the scoffs, the laughter stung like glass. They still lingered, unresolved, like thunderclouds that hadn't yet broken, but in the cockpit, the captain had been listening. He'd heard everything, every word, every silence. Every cruel nudge of a photograph is meant to be sacred. He glanced at the instrument panel descent confirmed. Then he reached forward and pressed the intercom. A soft chime echoed overhead. His voice followed steady, composed, but laced with something deeper. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've begun our descent into Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Ground temperature is 41 degrees. Skies are clear." There was a pause, a long one. Then the tone shifted, lower, slower, carried by something personal. "But before we land, I have a special announcement." Every head lifted. Even the earbuds came out. The woman in the cream suit frowned, suddenly uneasy. The captain's voice returned stronger now. "Today, we have aboard a guest whose courage helped shape this nation's history." Eyes turned to Carter. Some in curiosity, some are in shame. That guest is Lieutenant General John R. Carter, a veteran of the United States Air Force. He flew over 200 missions in Vietnam. He led the 1968 rescue at Khe Sanh, saving over 70 men who were believed lost. The cabin froze completely. The woman's breath hitched. Her hands sank to her lap. Her face went pale. He lost his sight in combat, yet he has never once asked for recognition. A hand clapped, then another, and in seconds, the entire cabin rose. Applause thundered rolling like a storm through the fuselage. A woman wept softly. An older man whispered, "He's real. I remember reading about him." Even the boy from the back stood taller, pride in his small frame. And then the cockpit door opened. A hush swept the cabin like wind through leaves. The pilot stepped out. Crisp uniform, polished shoes, eyes clear, unwavering. He walked slowly, stopped in front of Carter. Then he saluted, snapped to full attention. "General, sir." Silence. Carter lifted his head. He couldn't see, but he felt it. Something familiar. Something sacred. The captain's voice cracked gently as he spoke. "You won't queue to disembark, sir. You'll be the first to leave this flight. And I'm honored to bring you home." For a moment, Carter didn't move. His fingers curled on the cane just once. Then he nodded. "Thank you, son." Gasps rippled. The woman in 1A looked up sharply. The captain's voice dropped lower, breaking open now, raw and real. "I'm the son of James Carter, your son." His eyes glistened. "You flew the last plane out that saved his life?" He never stopped talking about it. "And when I joined the Air Force, I didn't tell you. I wanted to earn it." A pause. "And today, I got to fly you again. Grandpa." A sob broke from the back. The cabin didn't move, didn't breathe. The woman who had once sneered now bent down slowly. Her fingers shook as she picked up the photograph she'd kicked under her seat. She didn't say a word. The flight attendant quietly cleared the aisle. One nod. That's all it took. The passengers stood straight, silent. They didn't move forward. They didn't crowd. They waited. For him. And so, John Carter rose, cane in hand, posture tall, and he walked down that aisle, his path flanked by reverence, not pity, honor, not noise. And beside him, his grandson followed, not as a captain, but as a soldier, escorting his commander home. John Carter said nothing as he stepped off the plane. His right hand gripped the cane. His left rested gently on the shoulder of the captain, his grandson, the one who had just called him Grandpa in a wordless way no one would ever forget. The first class remained frozen. No one sat, no one moved. They just watched. The blind old man, the man they once called a burden, now walked with the weight of history behind him, and suddenly all stepped back. They cleared the path, silently, willingly. The woman who had demanded a seat change faltered. Lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her designer bag slipped from her shoulder. Her hands trembled. Her gaze, once sharp, now shattered, followed Carter like she was seeing a ghost. A child in economy peeked from behind his mother's seat. When he saw the old man pass, he raised a hand and whispered, "Thank you, sir." Carter gave a quiet nod. At the aircraft door, the captain turned to the intercom. His voice, no longer just a pilot's, became something ceremonial. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated." A pause. Lieutenant General John R. Carter, who flew 214 combat missions in Vietnam and holds the record for the most soldiers rescued in a single operation, will now disembark first. Applause rose again, not loud, not wild, but steady, like a heartbeat, like farewell. As the wheels touched the tarmac, the ground crew stood at attention. A woman in uniform wept quietly. She lifted her phone and took a photo of Carter from behind. Frail silhouette, white hair, wooden cane, and on his coat sleeve, the faded patch of the 173rd Airborne Brigade. At the bottom of the stairs, a black SUV waited. Its door opened. A young Air Force officer stepped out. He saluted sharply. "General, sir. Air Force Command requested I escort you personally." Carter smiled faintly. "I'm just here to see my grandson." The officer lowered his hand, smiling softly. "It's an honor for all of us, sir." The SUV pulled away, back inside. The boy from first class turned to his mother. "Mom, why didn't he talk more?" She looked at him, thought for a moment. Because sometimes just standing there is enough to silence all of us. Later that day, a photo was pinned to the bulletin board in the crew lounge. It showed Carter, framed between two rows of seats. A soft shaft of sunlight lit his shoulders like a quiet halo. Beneath it, the captain's handwritten note read, "He needed no ticket. He's why we're here today." That evening, a video spread online, just 29 seconds. No music, no captions, no commentary, only the sound of footsteps. Carter walks between rows of silent passengers, a woman bowing her head, a boy placing his hand over his heart. Millions watched, millions wept. Among the comments, one anonymous message stood out. "I still remember that flight. Grandpa, thank you for flying, even when you couldn't see, because behind glory, beyond medals, amid a world that forgets too easily." John Carter never asked for anything. He lived quietly, like those emergency landings long ago, when the sky was fire, and no one knew if they'd ever touch ground again. And today, he landed once more, not for applause, not for attention, but to remind a plane full of strangers and a world watching online of a simple truth. First class doesn't define worth. It's how you live, and what you were willing to give up, so others could go home. 3 days after that flight, a small article appeared, not viral, not loud, just a quiet piece, tucked in the Washington Post's Silent Heroes column. No color, no headline fireworks, just a black and white photo. John Carter seated alone on a stone bench at the National Mall, his hand resting on his wooden cane. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial is standing behind him. The headline read, "He brought them home." Beneath it is a quiet opening line. "Some took flight before we were born, and when they returned, they asked for nothing save a quiet seat." The only interview came from the flight's captain, Lieutenant Daniel Carter. He said just 3 sentences. "My grandfather never sought a medal. He only asked if we remember those who didn't return. And he taught me, to be a man is to stand up when another is humiliated. 1 week later, American Airlines installed a small brass plaque inside Flight 785. No cameras, no speeches. It read, "In honor of those who flew so we could sit." They didn't name him. He wouldn't have wanted that. But the crew whispered something different. Seat 1B stays empty, in case he ever comes back. The woman who sat beside him. She disappeared from the headlines. However, weeks later, a letter arrived at Andrews Air Force Base, plain paper, simple ink. I saw the light, not from the plane's window, but from your back as you rose to leave the cabin. I stayed silent too long, I'm sorry, no signature, but they knew who wrote it. At Reagan National Airport, near Gate 12, a new oak bench appeared, no fanfare, just carved words on its backrest. To those who never needed an invitation, you're the reason this gate opens. People started calling it the quiet boarding lane. No one claimed credit, no one sat long, but every now and then, when a veteran in a worn coat walked past, or a service member paused nearby, someone would nod and whisper softly, "Welcome aboard, sir," and Carter. He refused interviews, turned down every invitation, still walked the same path each morning, still left food at the park, still greeted his guide dog, Duke, with a gentle pat. But something changed. The neighborhood kids gave him a new name. The general on the bench, they didn't know his rank or what he'd done, only that he smiled when they passed, stepped aside politely, and nodded, like he was saluting someone invisible. Someone only he could still see. Because some heroes don't ask for podiums. They don't chase medals or spotlights. They only need a plain cabin, a wooden bench. A grandson's voice called them sir. They don't wait to be remembered, because they carried entire generations through fire. So others could sit in peace. So if you meet someone whose hands tremble, whose coat is worn, whose eyes stare far beyond the present, don't turn away. They might be the one who paved your path to freedom. They just never told you. So tell their story. Let no seat go forgotten. Let no bench stay, just a bench. If this story made you pause even for a breath, share it. Let every cabin and every park bench become a place of respect, not prejudice. Leave a comment. Tell us who you've honored, and if you believe that sometimes silence hides the loudest sacrifice, subscribe. Because here, we don't let quiet heroes disappear.